Hello and welcome to this week's lecture. This week we're going to be talking about information literacy and how to teach it. Instruction, particularly one type of information literacy instruction process that you can use. So, what is information literacy? This is a definition from ALA, 1989, and they say to be information literate, a person must be able to recognize when information is needed. So that person that comes up to you with a reference question has recognized that they need information. There's something that they need help with finding the information for. And in addition to that, in order to be information literate, you need to have the ability to locate that information, evaluate it, and use effectively the needed information. And these are all things that you can help a person do during the reference interview. And if you think back to our paradox about teaching, if you instruct everybody how to do this, we may never interact with our patrons and we won't know what they need. Again, this is a pipe dream. This is what we want to, where we want to get our users to the point where they can do this, but we're going to need to help them often along. Even if you're information literate, being able to locate it might mean going to somebody who knows where it is, i.e. the librarian. Use effectively is something that you can evaluate, and use effectively is definitely something that you can train people to do on their own. Another definition is from Lanning and Briner, the ability to recognize when information is needed, similar to the previous one, locate, evaluate, and use information efficiently, similar to ALA, but also effectively and ethically become an independent lifelong learner. So if you're information literate and you have mastered these skills of locating, evaluating, and using information, you can continue to learn throughout life. And that's what we want to instill in your students. Teach them skills that they can use going forward to be able to find out information and to use that information in an effective and ethical way. And there's a whole bunch of things, effectively thinking about how to write effectively, how to take notes effectively, how to synthesize material, and then ethically has to do with providing balanced points, providing, synthesizing the information and using it in such a way that you're not hiding things. So in other words, you're presenting both sides of the issue and also sourcing the material well. So you're accrediting who your source of material. So as opposed to our code of ethics that we talked about last week, this is ethically using information, as you go through life. It has to, can relate to our discussion about copyright last week. Knowing how to use that information that we find and give proper credit where credit's due. So this bundle of information called information literacy, we can teach it two different ways. One is as part of the reference transaction. You're actually kind of naturally modeling and teaching information literacy during a reference transaction. You're always modeling it. Sometimes you can more explicitly teach it. So you can show them access what's available and how to use it by what you're doing, or by talking them through the process as you help them through a reference question. We talked about the showing having the person see what you're doing, not just typing in, but talk about two screens, or having somebody look over your shoulder, or be able to see, turn the computer screen so that they can see it. Looking over your shoulder depends on the setup of your desk, etc. But so they can see what's available and how to use it. If somebody if you walk somebody through how to use a database as you're doing a reference question, that's teaching them about access and developing their information literacy skills. They may not know how to do, showing them some of the things we learned about searching, that can be part of the access. Walking them over to a part of the library and explaining to them, showing them where these books are, and modeling browsing around a book that you found. So you might have looked up something, walked over to the section, and found the book that they wanted, but say, oh, look, this book looks interesting in this one, because the Dewey Decimal System automatically organizes things to be like things to be together by the nature of the system. So that's part of what you're doing during the reference transaction. Interpretation is part of information literacy, how to read what you find, including interpreting statistics or knowing the conventions and language of a field. If you're helping somebody through the reference question by helping them find, beginning materials so that they can begin to learn the language of the field, that can be part of interpretation. We'll get into that a little bit more in teaching. That's something that's less modeled during the information, during a reference transaction, but still, you might read through an abstract with them, or take a look at a book to see how it looks. Evaluation's a bigger thing that you can do. We've talked about website evaluation. You can, kind of, if you're helping them Google something, you can say, oh, this site doesn't look real good, and they're just seeing that you're choosing and evaluating sites. And then information seeking skills, the whole package of how you're doing the searching, and etc. You're demonstrating those, and you can be talking to them about what you're doing in the information seeking process when you're actually doing your searches and evaluating. So it's a constant balancing act during your reference transaction. Should I show them how to use it, or just give them the information? How deliberate are you going to be about teaching some of these information literacy skills when you have may have a limited time with a reference transaction, especially in a school situation? So probably a little bit what you'll use more often is a deliberate teaching of information literacy through something like the Big Six, where you're teaching information literacy, inquiry, research skills, and it's a model that was developed by Mike Eisenberg and Bob Berkowitz, and it's used to teach inquiry, information, and research skills, information literacy, which has to do with the research skills. If you think back to when we're talking about having the ability to locate, evaluate, and use effectively, those are research skills. That's part of information literacy. So according to the website, Big Six integrates information search and use skills along with technology tools in a systematic process to find, use, apply, and evaluate information for specific needs and tasks. So I'm just going to do an introduction to the Big Six here, and I've given you links in this week's on Blackboard to the Big Six, and you can do more reading on the website. There's a ton of information. We'll visit the website in a few minutes. There's a ton of information there, but this can be a useful structure for teaching some of these information literacy skills. So Big Six has 6 components. The first is task definition. So what's the task? What information do I need? Identifying the information. If you think back to our information searching behavior, we get to a point where we know that we need information. So in order we're at a point where we recognize this need. We know that we need something, and now we need to figure out what we need. What's the problem? It could be a homework problem, it could be a research problem, it could be some information that's needed for a life problem. Whatever, we have to define it and begin a way to talk about it. And that, if you think about the beginning of the reference transaction, where when I purposely had you ask these broad questions when you went out to do your reference interview, it was so that the librarian could help you define the problem. Even though you already had ideas in your head, if you were somebody coming to the reference librarian, you might not have the problem well defined. So it's a process we go through to narrow down what kind of information that we need. And here we can hark back to thinking about things like imposed queries, which makes this whole information definition much more difficult, and sometimes we need to help students get over that. But it's having them understand that this is the first step towards getting information is important. The second step is information seeking strategies, determining all possible sources or most possible sources that they can use within the library, and selecting the best sources for what they need. And so these are things that you're doing during the during the reference transaction, is helping them do this, but it's also something you want to start teaching them to do. Think about when you do a lesson in on databases. You're having them not determine all possible sources, but determine different sources they can use within the library, and selecting the best sources, which also has to do with evaluation of the sources. Then location and access. Once they determine their sources and select the sources, they have to find out where they are, within the library, find out, you may have to order them. So understanding that you can get sources from other places is part of it. So locating, but it could be something as simple as walking over to the computer terminal and going into a database and locating an article. So printing out that article, then finding the information within the sources. And this is reading them, understanding how to use things like table of contents, understanding how to skim articles, just understanding how to access this information within the library. So the second half of the big six, the next three, are using the information. So once we have located the sources and found the relevant information within the sources, found the article that within the database, found the right page within the book, found a book and looked at the table of contents, etc., then we need to go to use of information. So read, hear, view. It might be a TED Talk, could be audiobook, could be article, could be an article that is read to them in ProQuest or EBSCOhost, whatever, and then extracting relevant information. So part of the information literacy is understanding how to get relevant information out of what you see on the page or you hear. So what are the main ideas? Note-taking is important. Citing is important. Getting all of these things and organizing them in a way that they can be used is part of information literacy, because if we can find the information, evaluate that we've got a good source, but then we get to the source and we don't know what to do with it, and we can't read it and understand what's relevant within that source, then it doesn't help them to fill their information need because they've found a source, but they haven't been able to extract the information. The fifth step is synthesis, organizing information from multiple sources and presenting the result. So creating the paper, presenting, you can introduce them to technology tools for presenting the result, like Prezi or websites, or however, physical things, like maybe they need to do a diorama, old-fashioned, but it's a way to, they have to take take information from multiple sources and present it in whatever way they need to do it. And this is where you want to help them create knowledge. They have a knowledge base to begin with. They know they need new facts. They add those new facts and synthesize them to create new knowledge. We had talked about that before, and with getting to the synthesis step, they're creating that new knowledge and sharing it with the rest of the world. And then the final step, I think, is really important, is evaluation of the process that you've just been through. So judging the results, how effective was what you did in producing your final result, and how efficient were you? So what can we learn looking back on what we just did in order to improve our process the next time? It's a reflective piece that I don't think we always take time for. So there are, on the website, there are these nice little poster things that you can, these handouts that you can have, that you could use as you're teaching lessons on this, that kind of, that distill the 6 steps. So if you're teaching the lesson, that makes it easier, to use these steps and just have a reminder, even if you put them up on the wall or put them somewhere where students can access them, that it reminds them of the steps they need to go through in order to solve an information need problem of whatever type it is. And maybe it won't be the results might be presented to them. They extract and can be, if you're trying to solve a problem for yourself, I want to know the best refrigerator to buy because I have to replace my refrigerator. I'm going to do research. What are some of the places that I think are going to be reliable for doing research? And my presentation is, I'm going to organize the information by making a list of those I want to look further into, or the best, and see if I want to go to the website and price them, go somewhere and price them. And the result is just presented to me. But then maybe when I finish, I was like, gosh, I spent an awful lot of time looking up refrigerators, and I found the best information in this place, and I'm going to consumer reports, and I'm going to remember next time I have to compare and contrast things, that I'm going to go directly to that source first and maybe not spend so much time doing X, Y, or Z. Or maybe I wrote it down on a piece of paper and I very simple, these are stupid examples, but I lost my piece of paper, so I had to redo it. So I'm going to do it, store my notes in a better place. That might include technology tools. So, if your student is looking, organizing the information, different ways technology can come in anywhere here. In presenting the results, how you organize it, where you're looking for it, and even the reflection could be done on technology. So there's also something that makes it a little simpler for the younger students. And actually, there's another thing I'm going to show you if you don't like if these can be a little bit young for even the Big 6 if you're using for older. But the Super 3 simplifies the Big 6 even more, and breaks it down into a plan, which is the beginning step, which takes in task definition, information seeking strategies. And you have the students, before they start doing anything, what am I supposed to do? What will it look like if I do a good job? What do I need to find out to do a good job? So these are preparation questions that can get them started on the Big 6 steps of task definition. what am I supposed to do? And information seeking, what do I need? What kinds of information do I need? And then in the middle, there's the do step, which includes read, review, tell, and present. So tell, make a picture. So this is location and access. So they find the information, go to it, read, watch, whatever, and then create something. So they combine those three steps together in this do, kind of very simplistic. And then evaluation. I think it's so interesting that the people that developed this, in simplifying this, felt that evaluation was so important that they needed to keep one of the three steps for evaluation. So did I do what I was supposed to do? And their evaluation here turns more on how do I feel about it, and should I do something else before turning it in? But I think did I do what I was supposed to do is a way of evaluating your process, and in a simple way. I really like the Big Six much better than the Super Three, but it could be a way of organizing a project in a much simpler way. So the Big Six Skills website is available. I have the link on the tab for this week, and there's a lot of information here about the Big Six. If you go, it tells you how they came up with it, and then there's a ton of resources, tells you how to get started. And as they say, it's best learned when integrated with classroom curriculum and activities. You don't want to just teach this in isolation. You want to, this is a great way of collaborating with teachers and co-teaching. So when you are starting a process, identify the steps in whatever they're doing in that particular assignment. And then there's some great instructional materials here, including these handouts. And this is the more grown-up version of the Big Six. They do talk evaluation. I think judging the product effectiveness, but I also think effectiveness and how you found information is part of what you need to look at. And then here are and there's another link, I think, with these that are separate, but again, it's a different way of looking at it. And then they have the Super 3 plan, do, review. So this can be a very useful page with lots of information as one of the ways. One of the ways of teaching information literacy or teaching parts of information literacy, they have all different kinds of organizers, checklists, posters. So here's the Super 3 Big Six posters. So, there's all different kinds of dig up gold. Okay, plan, do, review. So there's different posters that they've done if you don't like the ones, because this has become a really big thing. It's been around since 1996, and it looks like in this past year they've made it a 501. It's now a nonprofit organization to keep these resources. And if you see here somewhere, it says that they've kept them all. They've licensed a lot of this under Creative Commons licensing so that you can use these. So if you want to find more out about the Big Six, it's here. I'm not saying it's a way you have to go, but it's just one way of thinking about the process of teaching information literacy in an organized fashion, and encompassing all of those skills that you want students to be learning if you're teaching it in a deliberate way, um, and it supplements, you're supplementing it by modeling it. If you have reference questions, you sometimes get pieces of this when you're teaching about databases or how to use the library, but this gives a more comprehensive way of looking at developing information literacy in students in a bigger way. There are other things to use. So this isn't the be-all and end-all, but just one example of a way to think about teaching information literacy. And that is it for this lecture, and I'll see you on the discussion boards. Thanks.